great things were done. Not only the way of working, but also the actual nature of the work will change.
I'm so with you here, and we have a topic coming up here. You know, have you heard the expression "the last mile of analytics"?
Yes.
You know, yeah. And we've been playing around with that. We say the last mile is the first mile. Understand how it will be used and what the problem, you know. So there are many things to understand around this adoption topic that
Absolutely.
really flips the way you need to think about what my team needs to be able to cater for. It's not only ideation, it's not only technicality or data science to come up with an algorithm. It's also about how it will be used and how we will be adopting it. And in a global conversation, this last part of the challenge is huge, right? Because now you're doing something maybe in a team in Stockholm, Kista, and you are thinking about how should the team in Peru use this and how should I support, you know, so this becomes huge.
Yeah, so and then of course is where the network and the different drivers of what we call the digitalization and how do we actually engage the rest of the organization to do this, right? And to not only it's not really only about adopting the tool, but the reasons why they need to change it, what is in for them to do it, right? So I know, I mean, it's a big journey for many different companies to find the right model. And I also think that every organization finds different ways to do it. And sometimes some organizations find one model that works for them in their setup, in the way that they're organized, in
the context of their whole global organization.
Exactly. And others, like in Ericsson, or we've done before in others, in companies like in Electrolux or DHL where I work, we found a different way to do it, right? And every company, depending the systems, the culture and the values that you have, you find the way to do it, the model, right? That operating model that allow us to do that work. And it's a combination of the people, the technology you choose because of your legacy, and the processes that you have. So then you identify what needs to be changed.
But because if we go down now if we stay on the team topic here, one of the books or best practices that I've been sort of getting more and more deeper into has been on the conversation of team topologies. Have you read the book or have you heard about the concept of team topologies?
No, not actually, no.
Okay. And I think it fits 100% well into platform thinking, agility and all that. And it's basically to understand if you build a platform, you end up with teams with different characteristics and basically different OKRs. Yeah. And simply put, we can distinguish between a value stream oriented, like a product team, cross-functional, solving a real business problem, a use case. And then when you scale, you might have other teams which are focusing on the platform to speed up the work of the different use case teams. So if you can imagine, if you have one use case team and one platform, it's not a problem. If I have 20 value streams, use case teams, that basically we don't want them to reinvent the wheel on the infrastructure side, like, you know, DevOps topics. Absolutely. Then all of a sudden we have a team which has a horizontal understanding, and their KPI is not the use case value. Their KPI is total cost of ownership. Their KPI is scalability, reusability. So here now we this is now team topologies. We're starting to understand the value stream, vertical team, the horizontal style team, and then we can discuss, okay, and how do we deal with legacy? Okay, here we have another topology. We have the sub-system expert team. You need to know Cobalt, right, or Fortran, because you have an old super system, you know. So what's the team composition here that works with the platform team that, you know? Exactly. So this has been on my mind a lot lately, to try to understand on how to scale this up. Yeah. Do you follow this?
Absolutely. I mean, I can just recognize all the day-to-day activities that we do. Yeah. Because I mean, you're right? I mean, I was talking to a colleague yesterday exactly around this topic. We say, look, many people can now generate something on their PC. When we talk about AI, we can generate a model. It's a PLC. We show it to somebody, and great, it works. When you actually want to industrialize this, when you actually want people to use it at scale, exactly. Like we're talking about hundreds, thousands of users at the same time using one solution, getting a recommendation from an AI or choosing 3 different alternatives of people to work with. I don't know. Then it needs to be in a solid platform. And you're right, it's not really, maybe not even the same profiles of the team members that actually need to work on that. Because for now, then you need actually to secure operations. You need to secure that the machines are running. You need to secure that there is a service level. And you need to secure, on the other hand, that you need to cater for new ideas coming up from the business requirements and keep scaling up, right? And breaking it down in multiple pieces. But sometimes also, what I've noticed, I'm now thinking quite a lot about the innovation piece of all of this. Because very often, if I think about a very legacy system, right? It can also lead to teams getting stuck too much into just the operational industrialization things.
Yes.
You also need to have and cater for the innovation, the one that continuously will disrupt, even what the new thing that you have created that needs to disrupt it one more time. And if you don't have that mentality, that continuous disruption, continuous change, continuous improvement, you might end up that the new solution that you created and industrialized becomes legacy very soon. That's what keeps me awake.
But here we have another pet conversation we can talk about on my sake. I've been trying to understand this mindset shift when you're basically, your ideology is the traditional economies of scale. We draw swimming lanes of our process, fairly stable environments, and then you're moving into a situation where the innovation pressure is increasing, the productivity frontier is accelerating, the innovation pace that we need to deal with. All of a sudden, everything changes in terms of how do we organize to basically, on a daily basis, reinvent ourselves, which is crazy, right?
It's crazy.
But if you follow, you have Kurzweil's law of accelerating returns, right? Yeah. That it really highlights the exponentiality of innovation. You have Metcalfe's law of network effects and what happens, when we start stringing new things together. It all points in the same direction, that this is exponentiality. So it's not going to slow down. It's just going to go faster and faster and faster. Exactly. And my main understanding, together with Mikkel Klingvall, who has been on this show before.
I see.
Yeah, it's crazy because all of a sudden we start talking about economies of learning or ability to adapt and relearn is what counts.
Yeah.
And then not only for the individual, but for the team and also for the operating model.
Yeah.
Because sometimes our operating model is all about industrialization of what we know.
Yeah.
And we have a really, really hard time bringing in the new innovation. It becomes almost a clash.
Exactly.
So this is an interesting topic, right?
It is. And I'm fully with you when you say, imagine, that happens to individuals, but you need to change. And you're asked, some people have, especially generations with the digital mindset, but also generations that have gone through huge changes in life. Yeah. And it's not only the new generations that are ready for that, right? But it's how you combine them, how you make them actually work and get the best out of it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think, I've been working in very large companies, so I know how difficult it is sometimes to just get a huge organization to change. A huge organization might be a team performs really well, might be an individual, and changes and continuously disrupt and change within. The interesting part is when you do it with large organizations, when very large organizations start taking that approach, also reinventing again and again and again.
And here we can talk about culture and mindset and all this, but how to change culture and mindset in a large organization is a little bit to understand that maybe the mindset and culture is a result out of our core mandates, our core mechanisms. What KPIs do we have that fosters innovation versus what mandates and KPIs do we have that fosters efficiency, so to speak, on what we know? Yeah. And so I think this becomes very, very interesting when you have a large enterprise that how do we set up our steering mechanisms, our that values these things? in balance with being efficient on what we know. It's really hard.
No, it is hard, and it's and again, I mean, this is, I believe, sometimes it's not one answer fits everyone, right? It really depends sometimes on the type of organization and the history, the pressure, the urgency in a certain moment of time that allow us to take those steps. But innovation, and especially in the digital economy, it's sometimes we think we need to innovate and do the hackathons, of course, right? But it's when we realize that the innovation needs to happen every single day. And then chapter 4, that innovation comes into a system of production, a production system.
We speak the same language, because it's what you're saying, a hackathon or shooting New Year's rocket is fantastic and we get energized. Yeah. But how fast can we do it and do the cycle from idea to commercial monetization in reality at scale? Yes. Because all of a sudden now, what is an innovation until we actually proven that it works? We can have great ideas, but what is innovative? Well, it doesn't prove it's innovative until it's proven to work.
Exactly. So because the value.
So when we look at innovation, it's the whole system from idea generation to idea sorting and from discovery to filtering, from filtering to creation of something new, and then from creation of something new to adoption, ramping up, industrializing. Yes. So the innovation dilemma or problem, is it really a problem of coming up with great ideas? Or actually, if we look at our prototype graveyard, a lot of the great ideas are there. It was our failure to execute or to industrialize that really was the innovation failure.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the hard part.
And we have so many examples in the history, right? I mean, many innovations that actually had happened so many years ago.
Exactly.
But either there was not the right moment in the market, or the company was not ready to actually do the execution to conquer market share and to actually enable society to use it. That is, we have so many examples, and those examples happen all the time in big organizations. Right.
So I will put innovation to the list here of topics, but we want to have a great conversation today. So I must welcome you properly, Danffer Navarro from Ericsson, joining us here today.
Thank you.
I'm really, really excited around
Super
this.
Happy to be here.
And you've had many interesting roles from Electrolux all the way up into Ericsson through your career. So I'm really keen to learn how you ended up in your thinking where you are today, because already now, in the first minutes, I usually say, I have goosebumps moments when someone says something really smart, and yes, I wish I could say that smart. You already done that to me today.
Great.
That's good. Good. But who are you, Danffer? Could you just introduce yourself a little bit?
No, awesome. I mean, again, super happy to be here. I come from Peru, so I'm going to tell you a bit my story, how I ended up in Stockholm and in Sweden.
And in AI space.
And in the AI space, right? So it has been a journey, and I study economics. That has been my background. And in economics, I work in strategy. I work in developing macroeconomics models. Econometrics was one of my favorite topics. I remember being called a bit like, are you the only one that really likes that? No, but we had a great teacher. He pushed us the boundaries of econometrics, right? And that's when I discovered a bit of a passion for computers and IT and systems moving and creating a model. So I was always enjoying that course. And one time I remember, I say, this could be a fun thing to do. It could be a fun work, to work in econometrics. Mm-hmm. And that time had a bit more of a fancy quantitative analytics, or quantitative analysis was called, right, at scale. We didn't have the supercomputers we have today. So, but I studied there. I've done many things and worked in the telecom industry, in the airline industry in Peru. Then in the airline industry, in finance and in sales, I decided to do an MBA. I went to Rotterdam, in Rotterdam School of Management in RSM. It was a fantastic experience, great colleagues, great people, a lot of inspiration. In that MBA, through my career, I realized, this econometric time is actually coming back, because before I was much about into building solutions and models, and I was kind of the first adopters of the Excel, all the Excel functions that you could find. That was not the time where you didn't have any more these visualization tools or anything like that, right? So you still had something, there was Excel and other tools that you manage. So I did the MBA. In the MBA, I love the statistics. I remember, I was actually probably one of you that really loved the statistics. And I thought, wow, this is super exciting. I mean, this is one of the things that I really want to work on, right? So after the MBA, I went to DHL. I worked in Germany, in Bonn. Fantastic experience with a lot of great colleagues. And I had the luxury again to have great people that believed in me and gave me opportunities to do sales performance in that moment. So, and I went deep into that was my opportunity. Now I actually will learn and understand everything, how you create a system to visualize things and put all the numbers together. So we got the greatest sales performance in the group, right? And we did that. So it was a great experience, and that's how I learned. And I developed in the very early ages of data scientist, start developing things myself. And even though my role was as a senior expert into performance management, right?
So what is it really that we need? I mean, like maybe it's the parts of super narrow AI that is super good at super microscopic tasks, and then it's the meshing of combining it. Really blazingly fast for different things.
Yeah. And then it comes again, I mean, we go to the topic of organizational design and patterns, right? Mm-hmm. So imagine when we get the point to many organizations are able to make these connections. That also means that across an organization and across geographies, you need to be able to have a lot of people that understand. It's not just few people in the headquarters that understand the connection, but it's a lot of more people.
Yeah.
That's when it's embedded into our way of working. Because if it doesn't become something hype anymore, it becomes something that you actually can co-create. You even somewhere in the US or in India or in China, you actually can change the network, adapt it by yourself, right? And you co-create and you create this mesh kind of concept, right? But that is why organizations, I think this is probably not only valid for supply chain, this is valid for so many different types of industries where you need to create this type of competences and let these competences be very close to the business. So then you actually can, together at the end of the day, cross-functionally, create the disruption that every single business will face and faces constantly.
Me and Mikael, when we prepared the Data Innovation Summit keynote this spring, when you start thinking about this and you start understanding, well, okay, if this is a mesh, okay, if there's domains, microprocesses, microservices, microalgorithms everywhere, everything is connected. Mm-hmm. We have the possibility to do everything. Mm-hmm. Now, to get here and to capitalize on that, we started to understand and brainstorm and visualize how does leadership and middle management change? You know, what type of roles do we need? How do we need to act on this? Mm. And we basically try to frame it and define it as there's some new roles in this that we need to have that doesn't really exist in normal corporations today. And we frame the words, we need the people who can work as orchestrators. Actually, we haven't been used to working in cross-functional team, and how can we orchestrate for value from the supply chain, the workflow, to the algorithm, to the data? There's an orchestration problem. Yeah. Then we need federators. So if we do these algorithms and everything, how can we start putting them in a mesh so they become harvestable and reusable? Mm-hmm. So now we're doing Metcalfe's law, right? So how do we achieve network effects? Yeah. How do we avoid orphan analytics, that this algorithm can only be used here, but how can we get network effects? So this is now, then you need to federate what is happening one part of the organization so it can be used as a big graph, imagining graph.
Exactly.
And then we realized the next level of problem becomes when everything is connected, we can potentially do anything. And now we need to start navigating the opportunity landscape. So now it's a little bit like, we could do, imagine like 10 years down, everything is connected, we could do anything. Now it's the choice. Which problem is useful to solve, and therefore which microservices or algorithms are useful to connect.
Exactly.
So we get to some sort of different type of problem that has to do with orchestration, federation, and navigation when everything is connected and when this mesh truly exists, right? So, and this is a little bit changing to the traditional line manager.
I agree. And I think also, I mean, the question maybe many companies should be asking themselves is, do they have the chance to actually do that already when the mesh is there? No, right? You actually need to prepare for that. You actually need to build it. You actually need to have these competences and build it across.
Because it's a little bit like lighting up a massive graph. You need to, of course, you don't have all the nodes at the beginning, but you need to have a fundamental idea that I'm node by node building a mesh. Node by node, I'm doing something that creates value here and now, but it's at the same time increasing my data AI DNA. It's growing the mesh.
Exactly.
And so this means that some people at least needs to be ahead of the game. I mean, like you get to these different phases. We need to excite people to get going on this journey. Then we need to explore and really learn how it's supposed to be done. And then when we start nailing it down, we need to expand on that investment and go in this direction.
Exactly.
And then ultimately extracting value and capitalizing on it. But it's quite challenging, right? Because it's not like you need to be a huge investment up front to have the whole mesh, but you need to strategically start investing in this direction, I think.
Exactly. No, yeah, obviously, because I mean, again, back to the disruption, right? I mean, when you don't do that, and if you are not prepared, then you are not there. That people should see it as drastic as that, right? And some industries allows you for the level of capital that you have, and so that yes, you can adapt later on. But normally, it's not really the case. So but it's a fascinating. It's fascinating. What I really like it is when we put this type of concepts that we've been talking in our industry, data and AI, and how do we deploy it and how do we become efficient. And so now we are getting into this stage of it's not only the data and the AI and the analytics that we put, it's actually how the organization is designed to make it work. Right.
Okay. I think this is the real problem in many ways. I mean, like for me, that has been my. I think that's what I have tried to wrap my head around for years now, and that has been my sort of real focus, because I think that's where it ends up. That we're not going to get further by only throwing more tech on this. We need to understand how we organize the tech, but more importantly, not how we organize the tech, but how we fundamentally organize and design our teams and business in order to be data AI ready, in order to receive it or embed it.
Exactly. That's to me is the real game changer in many industries.
Yeah.
And if you nail that, your chances of succeeding in the AI or data journey dramatically increases.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because then even if you fail in certain areas, you still have the competences, you still have that opportunity landscape that keeps opening up more and more and more. It's in your DNA, right? So I really like what you say there.
But we take it afterwards. But it's really like going into the left or the right door. So are you setting yourself up on the trajectory to fail before you started, or are you setting yourself up to basically, okay, fundamentally we are on the right path. We will fail we will stumble for sure, but it's like, is this fundamental game changer that we are on a trajectory that is sort of taking us forward?
Exactly. And I think that's absolutely, and that's the type of mindset that leaders, people, anybody working on the field need to really understand.
Yeah, and here I think it's also then, if you are not exposed to data and AI, it's very hard to see this difference what you and me are talking about now. So I think also here, the industry, me and you in our roles, have been failing because we have not been good enough to take this conversation on the organizational design in such a way so it really connects and they are changing.
Exactly. It has been a lot of tech discussion, right?
I can really look at myself and I can see this. I have taken a lot of tech discussions thinking I was having a business discussion when I wasn't really.
No, exactly. No, I fully, and that's also you learn by experience, right? Because and normally sometimes when I talk to my data scientists, to my data advisors, and we always come to that conclusion, right? We're talking a lot about the type of algorithm that we're going to create, and then you realize people will not.
We love it. It's fun, but it's like. We forget that we are talking from our domain perspective.
Exactly.
And we need to first have empathy with the business domain perspective and start there.
Exactly. And they have other problems. They have to day-to-day deliver. They have so many other things.
Yes.
And I think that is the tricky part. And that's probably the area where to succeed, is to embed it so much that everybody starts thinking in these two directions, right? And it becomes a natural cycle.
Yeah.
How do you build?
But let's spend a couple of minutes. This is super good. I love this conversation. I'm not sure the listeners love it, but for me, this is so many learnings right now. But I'm a little bit curious. Could you go a little bit practical with us on how have we sort of your tech stack and your thinking about your technology setup and how you're working more practically? How has that evolved the last couple of years? So how are you setting it up? Because you said it, we need to design the teams and all that, but it depends also on how your technology is set up and how you're thinking about these topics.
Yeah. So, and I think we've gone and we tried different things.
Yeah.
A few of the things that we are now, I would say that has been really the differentiator in the way to push and also to get the change going, is not only to have technical team that collaborates and works very closely with IT to embed the right technologies. Then we start talking about creating data products. We're the first ones out creating and working with IT to get these data products live in a marketplace and so. But that's not enough, right? So then, and the same with AI. A lot of AI models, data scientists in our AI execution team working and designing and industrializing some of them and solving what are the type of problems we have. But that's one area, right? The other area is actually what I call digital advisors, right? So we created this kind of role where we say, look, in the beginning we have very different profiles that all still are relevant, from business analysts, from agile coaches and so on. But we realized we need actually something more business related that can talk tech, that can talk business, and that can make sense to a business. In a business language can make sense to somebody who is going to listen why this is so important, right? That is the role that we created, the digital advisors or digital partners, right? It's very senior people with a lot of experience, either in the data field, lead data scientists, some of them from before, or in the business, or a combination of both, right? That I think has been one of the greatest successes we've been having, because it has actually addressed the problem of change management. It has actually addressed the problem of not getting enough out of the data that we're getting, because now we're talking about value. Now we're talking about, okay, this is not the value realization, but this is the adoption that we're going to make, and so. And I'm not sure if we were the first ones creating this concept, but I kind of steal it from pride from a lot of tech industries and what you normally call the account executive, right? You have a sales executive that takes care of the account. For us, the account is one of our business units, and this business units, this digital advisor understands all the different pains, understands what you want to solve, where the process you're getting stuck, and then goes back to the team and say, okay, now this is the technology, this is the opportunity we can find. And then, of course, once we try it, then we can industrialize it. That model, I really believe on. And I think now it's paying off a lot, what we're doing.
Because I think I fully understand what you're saying, because this is also a challenge, because you're in a global context. Because you can argue we can embed things and we can be close to the teams. We said that. Then you have the next problem. How am I close to a business unit in Peru, right? And here all of a sudden now we need to now start identifying the data opportunity or the digital opportunity together with them to get them excited and to really solve the problem worth solving to the individual business unit. So even if you have a lot of good stuff, what they need in Germany versus like a core market versus what they need in a emerging market in Africa might be very, very different, right?
Exactly. No, it is not only they need different, but they also need a different speed. They have different landscape, sometimes different tools and stuff. So of course, all of that needs to be put into the context, right? So that's why it's so important. And also some practical problem, of course. I mean, if you're realistic about organizations, you're never gonna, if you want to embed something, if you have an analyst, a business person working, let's say in supply chain lingo, a planner, right? You're never gonna hire as many data scientists to work with a planner, right? So you need to have some kind of a mechanism to be very efficient as well, produce a lot, develop a lot. That's something that makes sense and helps the business. And that's where this role of digital advisors becomes so important for us. And it's paying off, quite a big deal, I would say.
Should we stay more on Ericsson or should we move over to some more themes, like more general topics and philosophical topics?
Wow, I love philosophy. So
no, because we had prepared a couple of different themes to discuss today. And I think there's a segue here from the digital advisor role in the conversation we had now to one of the themes we talked about discussing. And when me and Anders have been talking about this with many guests, we put sort of the label on this, the AI divide. And we are sort of, you can now explore this topic on macro level. Do we think there are tech giants that are on a completely different trajectory and maturity when it comes to AI versus the rest of the world? And, is that good or bad? This is the sort of macro perspective. And then we can discuss countries and regions. Are we falling behind in Sweden on AI compared to China or US? And this now is the divide between the front runners and the rest of the world, and what is the consequence and impact and danger, so it doesn't matter. Then there's another way of looking at the AI divide, and that is going into a large organization and understanding on a micro level the divide between the front runners, so to speak, or maybe even the people working within data and AI who have sort of seen the light. I mean, like me and you, we sit here, this is the new algorithmic enterprise, and we are excited. And for us, let's go, let's design this company and make our business into code, right? And then, of course, if you haven't been exposed to data and AI in your normal business life, you don't have the same starting point in this conversation. So here we have a divide on micro level, and I now want to connect it all back to what you've been really passionate about, which you used the word digital inclusion.
Yeah.
So for me, what we're doing here when we're getting digital advisor, we're working slowly and steadily to take away this chasm, to basically make sure we are all on the same team, we're on the same page here. So this was my setup on the AI divide, moving into digital inclusion, and I just want to hear your 5 cents on this setup. You can take it any way you want.
Yeah, no, I think when you think about it, the example you put, right? Companies, tech companies building and being so high, different, ahead of the rest and differentiating. The question I ask myself is why? Is it the technology they're using? All right, they are inventing something new, right? Who is doing that? The people, right? And so they are getting the talent that wants to do more things and wants to explore and innovate and have the mindset so they can strive. And I think, when we recruit and we look at different profiles, there is always this differentiation that there are some more industries and more companies where a lot of resources are located. And there are others where they're not. Others where it's a lot more difficult to get, right? And that I constantly is a constant worry I have, to be honest, because I think when we talk about organization, we also talk about generations, exposure to technology, and sometimes that exposure on long is the one that generates the opportunity, the mindset that yes, something actually could be done differently. And there is a divide being built in the world. And also when you also look about how much code kids are being taught in school, some countries are doing that very early, a lot earlier. Not everywhere. Other countries don't even touch it until you go to high degree education, right? And that is very dangerous for how the world will shift.
And why is this a problem? Why do you think it's dangerous?
It's dangerous because you start concentrating. I mean, some years ago, we talked about data as being the new oil, right? Then the way that you use and the insight that you generate to be competitive in the market is the source of that. So, and that's the insight is the one that actually generates that kind of competitiveness. So more countries, more companies with that type of embedded and mindset and that type of talent, if you have more of that, you will have again more chances to be more competitive and become more dominant in a certain area, right? When it's so imbalanced, when the opportunities are not the same, not only that resources and talent becomes really scarce, but also we are the risk of creating the conditions for having a huge divide where there is a very different way of looking at the world, where people are completely, and there is always early adopters of every technology and so on, but there are people that are running because what this new age of Industry 4.0 and data and technology has shown us from the 2000s is that you can run a lot faster, right? The curve is not anymore a very steady curve. It's just goes like this. So without the talent, without starting very, very early, every country actually investing really heavily in teaching and showing this to the generations, and new and old, it creates and has the potential to actually disrupt the way that we live. And I hope we're not going to get into that. But that's why I think we actually have to invest. We actually have to teach and not only and females as well in the tech industry and kids and young girls and so get into this business, because you actually need to have all type of cultures, points of view, to be able to actually build something that represents what humans is, right? And that's back to what we discussed some time ago. If AI is a representation of human behavior or human actions and human millisecond decisions, then
it needs to be a fair population representation.
Exactly. Otherwise, only one type of people will only do it. And that's the risk, is the bias, right? And there is a lot of more expert people that can talk about bias and the ethics in AI. But that is one of the consequences that could happen and will happen more if you don't embed it.
Okay, let me... One of the reasons on missions, I coined the company, I founded DareDux. And DareDux is data AI ready. Dux is Latin for guide. And very much, doing my own ikigai, trying to find my purpose in life, I realized that, one of the bubbles when you're trying to sort out what you're good at, what does society need, what can you actually sell to make a living on. The societal topic here, for me, it has been this around how problematic it is if we don't have digital inclusion or data and AI inclusion. Mm-hmm. And I think you're nailing that down really well. So for me, the core problem of the AI and data divide is fundamentally, if we don't have inclusion, if we don't have diversity in the way the world evolves, it's going to be very, very problematic. And one very simple macroeconomic problem here is that imagine you having the workforce of a whole country. Mm. And then I put two different scenarios in front of you. Mm-hmm. Imagine that whole workforce of that country is disrupted from the outside by 5 companies. 3 that has AI for greed as their motto, 2 that has AI for control as their motto. On the other side, I put a scenario where we must disrupt ourselves. From the individual that realizes that I have so much opportunity in the AI world, not maybe in exactly the job I was doing, because that is typically the type of job an AI could do. But if I educate myself, if I'm willing to disrupt myself, I can find a fantastic career. And then I take that from individual level to organizational level to regional level. And all of a sudden I put the scenario, what do you think is the impact on the Swedish economy if we manage to disrupt ourselves versus we were disrupted by one of the 10?
Yeah.
What's the difference here? I think this can be a very prosperous way forward. This we will have a lot of heavy, because instead of a positive spiral, it becomes a negative spiral, with unemployment and all that kind of stuff. So I think this is very, very important that we understand early. Exactly.
And that's the thing is that, even we talk about the industrial revolutions, right? So before it used to happen in a more steady pace, right? We knew it was going to take many, many years.
Yeah, we could see them even. We could see the shifts.
Exactly. And then you see it. But this revolution is different because it's happening so fast. And if you're out a few years into this area, you lose. You don't know anymore because there is new, even in our area, you need to keep getting to know all the data, all the algorithms that are new and technologies and so on. Imagine if somebody has not even started, right? And that's why I think it's so important. And we need to put a lot more effort. And I think it should be mandatory too.
Yeah, and what in one way pushes me harder, but also scares me, is that when we had guests on this podcast, I have examples of Lars Albertsson Lalle, who worked at Spotify, who worked at Google, and who's successfully really understanding industrialization of data, right? And how does looking at the inside of the data factory, so to speak. And if you listen to his podcast, the main argument he has is like, if you haven't worked at Google, if you haven't worked in one of these companies on the inside and on these core things, it's really hard to understand how much further ahead they are in understanding how to industrialize the core mechanisms of treating data and managing data. Exactly. The core mechanics, right? That means data becomes productized, that you can use it for anything, right? The way you treat data from the start, the way you have APIs, everything can be used by anyone in a company like Google. And his argument is a little bit like, even when I try to explain it, it does not make sense if you haven't really understood it. This is how far away they are in terms of getting the basics right. Exactly. And now when they can get the basics right, they can point that opportunity on anything they want.
Exactly. Yeah,
and we don't and how to make this wake-up call, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because we are also part of this traditional ecosystem, right? Imagine you go to school, you learn over a number of years many different things, you're ready to be in the workforce, you find a job and you learn something new, and then you have the time. We always assume we have the time to learn. Soon that will not be the case, right? So not only because it becomes more competitive, but it's differentiator for companies and for countries. To be competitive, you need to be digital.
But okay, and now, because if we now break this down then from the macro level, and let's now be way more concrete, and there's something that we all can touch, and we can deal, and we can take steps tomorrow in our work. So we can look at the AI divide on the micro level, because ultimately, if you want a society to change, the change starts with the people changing, right? Exactly. A society ultimately is made up of people.
All about people.
It's all about people. If it's an individual in an organization, if it's a politician. So here we now come to what are fundamental, simple concepts that helps us close this chasm. Because I now argue that in any larger organization that has data and AI as part of the agenda, like Ericsson has, of course, there are many quite super brilliant people who kind of understand this. Now, this is where I find really interesting to connect it back to the digital advisor role, and what are the mechanisms, what are the things we are doing or could be doing tomorrow that starts nudging away at this chasm? Because I don't think it's not a flick of the switch and then everybody understands it, right?
Exactly.
It's a nudging game we're into,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. Is that
this is where this role comes in, mechanisms like this, designs like that.
Exactly.
What are you thinking?
No, and that's a lot of the thinking, right? It's not just to collect demands. It's to really make through change.
Because that's education, right? Because when you have a digital advisor, and this needs to be senior guys, right? And they have this, and because they are coming into a room with senior leaders, business guys, and in one way they are collecting demands, but at the same time the agenda is to do it in such a way so it excites, and by doing that you need to educate.
Exactly.
So the whole process of collecting demands is also the Trojan horse for education. Is my idea.
Absolutely, and that's a lot of the point. And with all respect, I mean, you need to actually show the opportunities, and not only show what is already done, but what is possible, and open the discussion, right? Because when you open it and you have this constructive kind of relationship, and you build this type of relationship through the work that the advisors are doing, then actually you start realizing the change when the business is the one asking. The business person now start realizing, I have an idea now. Now I think this process, we could use this. Do you think it's a great idea? It might not be, but yes, of course. And now we start looking, because that's when you're already saying, you start changing the mindset, right?
And we're having a deep conversation right now in Scania. I'm not going to name any names, but we think one way of looking at this is, how do I have digital advisor? How do we do data opportunities that creates pull instead of trying to push out tech or push out data science, right?
Yes.
So then, and if you want to create pull, because the whole change game becomes different, because all of a sudden when your AI initiative is on the highest of the business case agenda of the business user out there, he will drive the change home because he wanted it.
Exactly.
He said that was more important. It wasn't some sort of head office initiative.
Exactly.
So we are now dealing with the topic, and in my opinion, the digital advisor has the job not to collect demand, but ultimately to create demand and create pull, and therefore having a change readiness that is completely different to when you're trying to push something out.
Exactly.
Would that be a fair assessment?
That is exactly the point. And then, of course, I mean, there is very senior people and very humble. They know huge knowledge on our core business and knowledge in the technology. That's the type of person that will be this go-to person. Like, now I have a question. That's the satisfaction we get. But now we say, somebody in the business has a question. How do I do this? These guys and these ladies, they fix it.
Trusted advisor.
They trust the advisor. Then you trust the AI. Because that's the representation, saying, okay, now actually it makes sense because he or she has actually explained that to me, and now I know how to run my business through that, right? So, it's
But inclusion is key, and the way to work on it, we can discuss the macro level, and then we can have discussions on investment with politicians. But in reality, if we all focus on the micro chasm and start figuring out the mechanisms, like you have done in Ericsson, stuff like this is what we need.
That's what makes a bit the difference. That's how we move the needle.
That's how we move the needle in reality.
Normally tell that, right?
Move the needle.
That's how we move the needle, because it pays off, and it's paying off for us already. Yeah. So highly recommend, and happy connect with these guys because they are extremely good.
I might take you up on that, because we are very much in the same global problem. How do I create pull out of Mexico?
Exactly.
Let's take another core theme here that I think is quite interesting, and it has all to do with the world evolving right now. And we actually came into it to some degree when we started using the word mesh, and because I think you can expand on that topic quite a bit. So if we start thinking about the future, and I've seen it very clearly working in the energy industry before, now working in the transportation industry, and I think telco is a good example here. So what I understand is that the world is moving more and more into ecosystem thinking. And the very concrete example that sort of blew my head off 10 years ago in Vattenfall was, traditionally you had an energy value chain where you had a large capacity power plant that was producing energy, first step of the value chain, and then you take that production and you put that to the grid, and then to push it, to create energy that is available in the grid. And the way it works is like the production value chain P&L ends there by selling the production to a Nord Pool. So the next step of the value chain in an energy value chain is trading this, and then you have the whole network and how we get the grids to work, and then you have retail, and then in the end you have someone using the energy B2B to create steel or to do mining or to do manufacturing or whatever, or consumer. And the core realization was when we started doing renewables that all of a sudden we have people putting solar panels on their rooftops, and all of a sudden we have a producer-consumer, we have a prosumer. So all of a sudden this sort of linear one-way value chain starts breaking up in different actors, and we start realizing new actors like Tibber as a retailer, basically starting to look at different models. So within this ecosystem of the energy industry, there is a fundamental flow of electrons that needs to happen, and it is fun balancing of electrons. This is the physical representation of the ecosystem from wherever it's, and now the renewable, we have decentralized production. We don't have big one nuclear power plant or whatever. We have many wind parks, we have many different parts, and it will just grow. Then you get to flow of value. So when I have, so the electrons and the electricity bill, what I have paid at home is one thing, but ultimately now when we have super high energy prices, I'm more interested in what I can do to minimize my energy consumption. So all of a sudden there is the fundamental, how do I, there's a service, there's something else here, there's another flow of value. So I pay this spot price for my electrons, but ultimately my real value is to get my bill down. And if someone can get my bill down with 30% just by being smarter, I'm all for it. Yeah. So here now we have this ecosystem thinking. And the way I understand this now, in order for this to flow in real time, if you want to balance a grid, if you want to balance a telco network, same, right? And you want to monetize, you want to maximize your ARPU, and you have all these different players, you have all these different, the whole thing is converging between internet and all that ecosystem. And everything is ultimately fueled by an underlying data and algorithms. This is the world I'm seeing, and when we go to the transport ecosystem and you start not seeing Scania as a truck manufacturer, but an actor in the transport ecosystem where ultimately I want to move goods, story points for moving goods, it really, for me, moves the whole thinking to mesh thinking. It really becomes now modularized, distributed, because the decentralization is not only within your own company. It actually needs some of your data over here needs to be part of the data that you monetize in this service that someone else has. Exactly. It's meshed, right? Exactly. Yeah. Do you so how do you from Ericsson and how do you understand the world? Because I think the telco industry to some degree has been in this ecosystem thinking with roaming and everything. Of course. Longer than most industries. Exactly. Yeah, and probably that's why also in all kind of rankings also with the telecom industry is the one that highlights the more going through a lot of the technology, breaking the technology barriers, right? Because of that ecosystem, right? Maybe I can give you more an example. Like, I mean the way that we think in terms of data and the supply chain as well, right? Because it's very, very similar approach. I mean, we talk a lot about ecosystem, and that for us also means now supplier, right? A supplier that was only a supplier, and how the supplier will actually interact with us, and then the customer, and how the customer eventually in the future, because of the business disruptions, will monetize it, and this we're working in different areas with our data, and
we, of course, therefore also need to monetize our information, our data towards them. The key for all of this is typically we call integration, right? Because the challenge that I see is that, again, there are many companies that are going ahead, that are designing this because they know that is the path. Others that are thinking, no, this is not actually, there is not really an understanding that an ecosystem is the future or the very near future in some cases. Therefore, they have not prepared yet the capabilities to develop that integration between different nodes of this mesh network.
Yeah, and I try. I think one of the key fundamental capabilities that also telco knows all about is interoperability.
It is. Yeah.
And if I take the learnings from the telco ecosystem, take me back to the 3G world when we had CDMA, we had all these different standards for the protocol of how we were sending, how our networks were organized.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, in the end, to really get to where we are today, we had to standardize towards LTE. And we had to fundamentally take a fundamental consortium understanding on some sort of level to secure interoperability.
Yeah.
And I think, because if you, that's why I think the mesh thinking and to say product is so important, because it forces you to think, how can my data be consumed by someone else?
Exactly.
Actually, and how can it be trusted? So I don't even know what they're going to do with this data.
No.
So it has to have an SLA and SLO so it can be bought, and then they can trust my data in order to use it in their service.
Exactly. Yeah.
And here we have interoperability standards. We have these fundamental integration standards that can't be sort of proprietary anymore.
No, exactly. No, it's the
I'm extrapolating where this goes.
No, but I think you're right, and I think it's also the. I mean, I will say it also in a different way. So if one way or the other, it's going to happen that, or you need to be so well connected, it needs to be so well integrated that you need to actually be forced. You need to enable that network to happen.
Yeah.
Because you want to consume data, you want to sell the data.
But imagine if you're not part of the network, are you even relevant?
No.
But and because the point is, in the past we could be part of the network in an analog way.
Yeah.
Right? And we could do something and we could collaborate. But when the hygiene factor is real time, using your data in order to, because my service I'm selling to the customer over here is in real time. So I need now your data to do my part to that customer in real time. And here now we get to the fundamental, it's something else. You know, so that means you need to really think carefully, what's your input port, output port, how do you really make it, what's your API to reach this?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, even in a very high level concept, I mean, isn't it that the reason why people are going, or companies want to be in the metaverse? Because you cannot, if you're not there, you not exist, right? Similar in a network, if you're not part of that, you're not prepared to have the capabilities to connect to that network, what kind of business model you're going to disrupt? You're going to just be disrupted all the time, right?
So we're getting to a point where how can you be part of the new economy if you're an orphan in relation to no one can digitally connect to you and to your data?
Exactly. Yeah, and if you make it, I mean, there are reasons why you need to be protected. Of course, there's a lot of security aspects and so on. That's super understandable, but you don't, and you cannot become an island, right? Very risky.
So the biggest risk is to become an island here. Yeah. Is that what you do?
And also goes a lot together with the talent pool, right? So, I mean, imagine how many now talent working in data and AI, building these things. Would they look at a company that doesn't offer this possibility to explore new things and to have opportunities in that area? No, right? So it is becoming an island is basically you don't exist in the network, you're out of the node. Then it will be slow goodbye, unless you really work hard to be part of it and to shape it. Better than to shape it than to be shaped.
And because if the world and industries are moving into ecosystem thinking, you need to understand yourself as an actor in an ecosystem. And then, of course, you can decide and think about which role or which type of actor am I going to be. Am I going to be the platform? Am I going to be at the node? Am I going to be at the center?
Yeah.
But all that falls apart if you can't interact and participate as an actor.
Exactly.
And the core participation we're talking about is data and AI transactions flowing.
Exactly. And it's that capability to continuously even be ahead of the curve, and to shape it, right? So it is. But
I see the same. I see the world very similar to you, where this is going.
No, and to some degree, you might say it's scary.
Uh-huh.
Where are we going? To another degree, it's actually some of us fascinating because that's the new reality, right? And all the opportunities that we have ahead are just enormous, right?
And now we're ending up on the last sort of more philosophical questions, sort of rounding up here after more than 2 hours. So would you call yourself summarizing this as a tech optimist? Or, are you a tech optimist, or are you scared of, because all this stuff is in some way scary, right? And then we can think about all the stuff. You mentioned a little bit, when we open up into the network thinking, oh my God, how are we going to deal with security? How are we going to deal with GDPR? How are we going to deal with the AI Act?
Exactly. Yeah.
So ultimately, are you an optimist?
I'm an optimist,
you're an optimist?
Definitely. And I prefer to have the challenge.
Yeah.
And I prefer to face it. And I think we all need to have that type of mentality. Otherwise, the opportunities disappear, right?
So you see this as exciting and rather than scary?
I see it exciting, but I understand there are many people who find it scary. And that's the people that we need to bridge the gap of digital inclusion. Yeah. Right?
I love that wrap up. We need to do the digital inclusion to get to bridge and help the people who are scared to be excited and to be part of the journey.
Yeah.
We all need to be part of the journey.
We are, exactly.
Fantastic. Okay, last questions. If you were going to print a T-shirt out of what we talked about today, or what are the key sort of T-shirt quotes or something we said today that you sort of stuck with you from today? What are the key pullouts?
What I really like about our team discussion.
Team is everything.
Right.
That's one T-shirt, right?
It's one T-shirt. It's by itself. It's the most important. And I think also, the ecosystem. When also you talk about micro level, right? Mm-hmm. The ecosystem is also this cross-functional team that makes it happen. Yeah. Right. Digital advisor, I hope, is one word because
Okay. Well, how would we frame? Because I'm gonna print some T-shirts for you for your digital advisor. But what should it say? Digital advisor. We need to have a good slogan here.
Yeah. Should we think about breaking the digital divide?
Digital advisors fighting the digital divide.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm going to do it. Digital advisors, and then.
Or closing the gap, so the divide. Yeah,
closing the gap. Yeah. Closing the gap. Good. That's a good T-shirt.
Yeah, I believe in that.
I love it. Okay, and very last two questions. Do you have any what's the next sort of plan moving forward, or something you're really excited about happening now over Christmas or next year?
No, I think it's I'm actually looking really forward to see how society, this hybrid model has changed the way that we do things. Has been a catalyst also in that sense to open the eyes and opportunities. So I'm really looking forward to just capitalize a lot of the investments, effort we've put, and keep driving this momentum, right? Keeping driving and helping people to get to this, not only closing the digital divide, but making AI first really sense embedded in everything. So that's my goal, and I think, and that also that's my key takeaway as well, right?
Awesome.
And of course, Christmas is coming, spend time with the family, and energizing in this time.
How often are you back in Peru?
Actually, not very much. I have my friends and my family back there that that ask me now is
Now's
actually
the time. Now's the time.
Now my kids, my youngest one is 6, so I think now they're also asking quite a lot, and they also want to go. So it is time.
So you have a plan somewhere not too far.
Yeah, it's time to go. Yeah.
And then I have one last question. Who could you recommend to come on this pod that you would like to listen to?
Wow. Have Josephine? No.
Not yet.
Yes, exactly. Has she been in the pod? Okay. Yeah, because she hasn't. I would say Josephine is, especially when we talk about AI, ethics, building, closing the divide, having less bias, and so on. I think she would be a fantastic person to talk about. And that's the person I think about and give her a call every time.
Good. Sounds like a great idea. Okay, Danffer, thank you very much for these 2 hours and 10 minutes. Yeah. That has been fantastic. And we have so much more to talk about.
It was super fun, super exciting. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation again.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Thanks.